And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, March 20th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So I didn't say the other link this time. I made sure to not do that today. So with that, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to talk about the Jets and their offseason moves. I know I touched upon them last week, but yesterday they did sign free agent wide receiver Mike Williams to a one-year deal to add to that receiving core to pair with Garrett Wilson. So I'll talk about that, the impact of that, and kind of just, again, look back at all the signings that they made this offseason. Then in the second part of the show, I'll look at the power rankings that were released this week from NFL.com, post-free agency. Again, moves are still going to be made, but again, not as major as what happened last week. The craziness for the most part has ended. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about a few wide receivers in the third segment. We'll talk about Jerry Jeudy getting a new contract with the Browns. We'll talk about Stephon Diggs and Odell Beckham Jr. as well. So that'll be the third part of the show, and then the final part of the show, we'll talk about the Bucs and what they plan on doing with some players. They franchise tagged Antoine Winfield Jr., but they also want to, obviously extend him. They also want to extend Tristan Wirfs, their left tackle. So I'll get into that as well. So with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is breaking down the Jets' offseason moves. So yesterday, they signed Mike Williams to a one-year contract worth up to $15 million. Big wide receiver, and of course, did miss a lot of time last season due to a torn ACL, but he did get off to a decent start, but just unfortunately ended up getting hurt and missed pretty much the entire 2023 season. But the Jets bring him in despite all that. A big wide receiver, and again, this was something that the Jets needed to do. Whether it was signing him or addressing it elsewhere, the Jets needed to, bolster this receiving core as well. To pair along with Garrett Wilson, which is big. Williams leads the NFL with 15.8 yards per reception among players with at least 200 catches since 2018. Again, he tore his ACL in Week 3 of 2023. So there is some risk there, but again, if he could be healthy, if he stays healthy, I think he could definitely produce with the Jets, and especially if we got a healthy Aaron Rodgers. So one of the things that my friend said yesterday, who was a Jet fan, he was basically calling out the people that were, begging for the Jets to sign Mike Williams, and it was because of his 2021 season. He set career highs in receptions with 76 and receiving yards with 1,146 while scoring 9 touchdowns. So that's one of the main reasons why fans wanted the Jets to go out and get this guy. And again, I think if he could stay healthy and you have a healthy quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, I think that could definitely be a good signing. And on top of that, it's a one-year deal. So again, like I said with Marquise Brown, this week, if it doesn't pan out, then it's one and done. So it's not like you agreed to a long-term deal with him. And, again, this also comes off of the fact that the Jets, they signed Allen Lazard to that massive contract, and he was a big disappointment last year. So, again, all the more reason to try to go out and get another receiver. But let's kind of look at some of the other moves that the Jets have made. So the big thing this offseason has been the offensive line. So, you go out and you sign Tyron Smith. And, again, one of the best left tackles in the NFL, but is getting older and has an injury history. He's missed 37 games over the past 4 seasons. They also brought in Javon Kinlaw, played on the defensive line for the 49ers. Obviously has a background with Robert Saleh, so they brought him in. The risk with him, injury history, but he was a former first-round pick, and he was, the player the 49ers drafted to replace DeForest Buckner. So they brought him in. They brought in Tyrod Taylor, of course, a legit backup quarterback, to be behind Aaron Rodgers. Knock on wood that he doesn't get hurt. But yeah, just in case something does happen, Tyrod could step in, and produce. He did okay with the Giants last year as their backup quarterback, but also he has an injury concern as well. So yeah, they re-signed their punter and their kicker, Thomas Morstead and Greg Zuerlein. At least for Jet fans, you could say that you had good special teams last season. But yeah, so they also signed John Simpson, guard. The risk with him is pass protection issues, and also he was flagged for 11 penalties last season. And then also, they did trade for Morgan Moses, which, to another tackle. So, again, the Jets, they addressed the offensive line. So hopefully the offensive line is better. You hope Vera Tucker bounces back and recovers well from the Achilles, I believe, right, that he suffered last season. And then you got Tippmann as the center. So, listen, the Jets went out and they addressed the offensive line, and on top of that, they also, brought in a wide receiver as well. They brought in Chuck Clark. I guess he was the replacement for Whitehead, who left in free agency. But what the Jets have done, though, is now with their pick, they could really go many different ways. They could go and draft an offensive lineman. They could go and draft a receiver. Maybe they go out and they draft a receiver. We'll see who ends up being available. I know that Brock Bowers has gained a lot of traction with rumors. Maybe there's a chance that he ends up getting drafted by the Jets. There's many different things that they could do. Or could they add to the defense? I think the offense is more of a priority in this draft, just because you want to surround Aaron Rodgers with as much talent as possible, and with as much protection as possible. I think the Jets will probably draft a lineman at some point in the draft, but they could really do a lot of different things with this late round. Well, not this late round pick, but this first round pick. So I'm curious to see what they end up doing, but I think they did a good job. They addressed the offensive line. You added another receiver. So, now again, the biggest thing with them is it's going to be health. That's really what it's going to come down to, because, my other friend did make a joke saying that, Rodgers, Mike Williams, and Tyron Smith are going to play a combined 12 snaps. And you don't want to see that. Again, if everything pans out, the Jets could definitely be a good team next year. But you got a lot of guys coming off of injuries. You got Aaron Rodgers coming off of an Achilles. You got Mike Williams coming off of a torn ACL. You got to protect Rodgers. I think if he's healthy, I think he's going to have a decent season. But if that's not the case and he's not getting the protection that Jet fans are going to hope for, then it's going to be another long season. You still got most of the guys on defense. That defense is still together, so you expect them to be good. But it's going to come down to the offense. And you hope for a healthy Breece Hall again. Because you saw what he could do when he's healthy. Towards the end of last year, he was great down the stretch. And he had a ton of carries in the Patriots game, in that snow game. I didn't have 30 plus carries, or I might be wrong, but yeah, he had a ton of carries in that last game. He went off. Nope, that is not the game I was looking for. 15-10 Patriots. That is not right. Let's see. Yeah, 17-3. Oh yeah, so Breece Hall ran for 178 yards, and I just wanted to go back and see. Oh yeah, he had 37 carries. Yeah, and a touchdown. I know obviously he's not going to do that every single game, but again, I mean, if the Jets if this offensive line is going to be good next year, I mean, that's only going to make Breece Hall better. So, it'll be good to have, a running game to rely upon. It's not going to just, fall on the hands of Rodgers. Having Breece Hall back there, that's definitely going to help. So, I mean, look what happened on the first play of the game against the Bills. I mean, Rodgers handed it off to Breece Hall, and he took it, 20 yards or whatever it was. And I want to see how, with a healthy squad here, I want to see what this team can do. And I don't want to see any injuries. But again, you got to cross your fingers. So, but again, I mean, I like what the Jets have done. I really do. I know for some Jet fans, like my friends and coworkers, they're not optimistic because something will happen. And I don't blame him for that. Because, I mean, again, I just talked about Rodgers handing it off to Breece Hall to start the season. You thought, wow, this is going to be great. They have a quarterback that's going to change this offense, even though it was just him handing it off. But it just felt different. And then all of a sudden, 3 plays later, he ends up getting hurt. So this is going to be take 2. And I hope this take is, the right take. And the Jets end up having a good season. Rodgers has a good year. And whatever happens, happens. If they end up losing to like the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game or something like that, I mean, at least if Rodgers ends up calling it a career after 2024, at least it'd be, going down swinging against the best. But again, that's, just a hypothetical. But, if the Jets are healthy, I mean, there's no reason why this team can't make the playoffs. I think the Bills, with, some of the subtractions that they've made and, letting go of some guys on defense, the reshuffling of the defense there, they're going to be a different team next year. But, I mean, you still look at them as probably the favorites. I mean, Miami lost a lot of guys on defense, but, by releasing them, but they've added. And the Patriots are rebuilding, but it's just, there are so many teams. I mean, the AFC North is a gauntlet in itself. So it's just that you got a lot of teams that you're going to be competing with, for playoff spots. If the division's not the answer, then you got to look at the wild card, and there's going to be a lot of teams fighting for that wild card spot, those wild card spots. So, it's going to be a lot of fun though, because you're going to have a lot of teams competing for those spots. And you saw that in 2023. So that's going to continue next year. So, but I think a healthy Jets squad, I think this team could definitely make some noise. But, I mean, how many times are you going to say it? We thought it was going to be last year. Well, again, I was hoping that Rodgers was going to go out and have a great year. But my one concern was the offensive line. And that reared its ugly head in the first game of the season. First drive of the season. So, but for the Jets, they addressed it. And, we'll see what happens. I think Joe Douglas did a great job. But now let's see what he could do in the draft. Knock it out of the park with this draft. But, again, you could do many different things with your first pick. Again, you could go, defense is probably the least likely thing, but you could go lineman. You could go wide receiver. You basically could draft best player available. I'm interested to see what they do with quarterback too. That might be another. They might pick a quarterback later in the draft, possibly. Again, it's all speculation, but I don't know. That's what I think. Because you got Tyrod Taylor and you got Aaron Rodgers. You also got to have a backup plan too. Again, they're not going to draft their franchise quarterback in this draft. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. But I could definitely see them draft. They're still going to draft a lineman, not with their first pick, but maybe later in the draft. And then I think I definitely see them taking a a quarterback. Well, first they got to move off of Zach Wilson. We got to see what ends up happening with him. So, all right. So with that being said, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we'll talk about the power rankings that were released this week. I'll go through them, and that is what we will do when we come back from our first break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.